Hi guys, this week we're going to be looking at something a little different in Fine Molds 1/48 scale S.21F from the movie Porco Rosso. Now, a bit of a note on this kit, the actual inspiration for this aircraft is actually a different aircraft than the S-21. What this is more loosely based on is the Machi M33 race seaplane. So, that said, let's open her on up and take a look. Now, one big thing about this kit, and in particular this era, is that there was a lot more wooden use. Now, a lot of the kits we've looked at prior to this are predominantly more modern, World War II onward. And this being sort of an interwar aircraft, wood was still heavily used. So that is one thing you'll definitely see in this kit is, all these parts that ultimately going to have a lot of wood play, such as here in the structural detailing, which they've done a fantastic job. The only other place I've seen this being done is in kits by Volks, which I do have a couple which we'll eventually get to at some point. But having all this detailing is a fantastic thing to have. I do applaud them for doing it, and what's more, doing it as separate parts instead of molded on. But I digress. So anyway, on this sprue, we have our main bottom part to the aircraft. Obviously, since it is a seaplane, it's nicely and very cleanly molded, perfectly smooth. Also in this sprue, we have our two machine guns. However, on this particular version, as it is the rebuilt version from the film, you're only going to be using one of them. We'll get into that a little later. Kit also includes a small cart, which are assembled here so that you can more easily display it. Also included in this sprue is a seated pilot figure of the title character Porco, which is very nicely rendered. Although, given how they positioned it, at least from this angle, does almost look as if it's a standing figure as opposed to seated. So, excuse me one second while I deal with my feline assistant. Next up, we've got the sprue containing our engine, which is fairly nicely done engine for a plastic kit. More often than not, you do see the engine detail skimped to some degree, but on this kit they do a pretty decent job. You also have another seed figure of the character Pheo, which has similar quality of molding. Though I'm a little underwhelmed by the prop that's included with the kit, as to look at both the pictures and others, it seemed like it needs to be just like a slightly hair bit longer, maybe about out to here to give proper size and scale. Again, this is one of those things, to my eye, may ultimately be correct, just one of those optical things. Carrying on, we have our two wing halves, as well as the separate ailerons, which are a nice way of doing doing this. I'd like if more companies did it in this manner, as it with this kit, given how the markings are, it does make painting and masking a little easier. Also in this sprue, we have our engine housing, which is similarly nicely detailed. I apologize, as a certain feline assistant is causing all sorts of problems. Continuing on, we have our main singular fuselage, since it's done in a split fashion, as the underside is of a smooth boat type. I applaud that they went with this sort of over-under configuration instead of doing the two halves down the long axes. This will make assembly a lot easier, as you now have just a very clean edge with which to attach with. Also included, we have our floats for the wings, tail, and rudder assemblies, all nicely detailed. Alright. Kit also comes with two small clear parts, one for the main windscreen and one additional one for the passenger compartment. Lastly, this kit does also include a singular figure of character Grace. And I'm hoping certain cat does not knock any more stuff over while I'm trying to do this. Apologize for rushing, but I'm trying to get this done before he causes any more trouble. Now, continue on. Get 2 sheets of decals, all very sharply done for the main character's aircraft. And let's get into the instructions. Excuse me. This is where I wish they had done it in a bilingual format, as it includes all this great information that would have been nice to be able to actually understand. But once we get into the instructions proper, again, much like a lot of aircraft, we start in the cockpit building up off of the main float section and building up all of the very nicely done internal detail. They do a fantastic job here. So it is one thing to be aware of, though, is that since it is highly detailed, you are going to need to take your time and go slowly in this section. Once you get out of the cockpit, though, things do go a little more smooth, a little smoother in the assembly process, as we build up from the engine and then finally attaching everything to the other fuselage section. Now, as I mentioned before, having the aileron separate does make decaling a little easier with how they've done the decals. Now, you could also paint it, but I would say, we've got decals, why bother masking for this? But overall, assembly is pretty straightforward. Just got to be very careful when you're doing the internal details. Now, there is only a singular marking option for the Taylor character's aircraft. So overall, it's an interesting kit, and definitely one, if you're interested in interwar aircraft, to take a look at. Doubly so if you enjoy the movie. Though I would say be careful when you're working on building up the cockpit area, as there is a lot of detail you need to do, and it's one that could easily be missed. So that was a look at Fine Molds S.21F in 1/48 scale from the movie Porco Rosso. Until next time.